Hello everybody and welcome back to what I hope will be a nice Sunday evening stream, or at least it's evening here in Romania. I'm not sure where you are watching this from, but yeah. So this stream is about continuing the work that we have started 2 days ago on Friday, and we have started to work on a .NET 6 minimal API, and I'm currently using Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition. It's of course the preview version of it because it's not released yet. So yeah, I guess we'll just continue from where we left off. And I didn't do any changes from where we left off last time. However, I have committed all the changes to the GitHub repository for this. And well, if you want, I can just. That's the repository. So also after the stream today, I will push the changes that we will do today to that repository, so you can clone it, you can fork it, you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, so let's get started. Let's run this API once again to just remember what we have done so far. So right now, I guess it's starting, of course, as usual on the other window. We have implemented basically 2 points here, two endpoints, the get all for authors, and we also use Entity Framework Core. So these authors are persisted here, and we also have a post to create a new author. Let's try it also out, and yeah, let's say the Scott Hanselman wants to create a blog on our platform. Okay, and it's first name and last name. Okay, and bio something and the date for today. So execute. So we see that this user was created, or this new blog was created. Actually, sorry, this is the author. I guess I'm already too tired. Yeah, right now we're creating authors, not blogs. We'll go to blogs afterwards. So if we execute this again, we see that we have here 3 authors right now. So that's cool. So everything seems to still work, which is not bad at all. So let's read somewhere where we left off. So my idea was that we would want to kind of use modules that are self-registering, and we have created a setup with these module extensions that we actually look for modules and we register them. And the registration actually has 2 parts. First, the one is the module registration, where each module can register the services that it needs, or actually require the services that it needs for that module. And then we have this map endpoints, in which each module would be responsible to map the endpoints that it actually needs. And we have implemented this author module right now, which is a very, very basic implementation of it with register module. And from here we just get the required services. We needed the iMediator and the iMapper, but in the end we don't use the iMapper anymore, so we can get rid of that, I guess. And yeah, we can just also remove this one. And one other thing that I see here that we can already remove, we don't need this DB context anymore because we inject it in the handler. As you might recall, we are actually using a setup, a secure setup, I would say, in which we are using commands and queries, and we use then a handler for them, or for each command or for each query we have a dedicated handler. And this is why we actually, for instance, in this create author command handler, we see that we inject here the iMapper and the thoughtful DB context directly in the handler itself, which is actually fairly cool because we don't need it in the module anymore. We still need the mediator because this is how we actually send the comments. I see here a question. Is it needed to have the author type being described in Swagger? Can we hide it somehow since it is not needed? I'm not sure why you say that it is not needed. What we are trying to model here is something similar like an API for a blogging platform like Medium. And there you should be able to get authors, to see information about the authors. Yeah, maybe to get the blogs that a certain author has. And we also have this idea that an author could be a collaborator to a different blog or several different blogs. So we need the authors. I'm not sure exactly why we should remove them. Okay, good. So the next thing that I want to do is, as said, one of my aims is to keep everything as clean as possible, starting with the program file, which contains actually only 11 lines of code. And as said, no matter how many modules we will have, the number of lines of code here will not change. And this idea is that I want to keep things as clean as possible also in the modules. And one thing actually to do that is simply just remove here, because we are executing here code directly in these map get methods or map post methods. And I want to get rid of this code and to run this in, well, in regular methods, I would say. Back to the question, in Swagger it is visible the author type also. Yeah, it is, and I guess it should be. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but I guess we'll look into that, and maybe it will make more sense once we implement also the blog endpoint, which will actually have several different endpoints itself. Okay, so the next step is to extract the logic that we execute here actually in methods and use methods here instead of simply lambda functions. That would be one other thing to do. And actually the cool thing here is that if we extract this in methods, like the controller actions, they have to be public. But this type of methods, they can be private, because they will be used only here, and that's it. For the consumer of the API, they only need to know about the author DTO, not the author. Okay, yeah, that's correct, I would say, but I'm not sure we will look into why that appears like that. Theoretically, it shouldn't. But we'll also look into how we can further configure Swagger in the minimal API, because there are some things that are different in comparison to a regular controller. So let's start first by moving this code out from these lambda functions directly into some methods. So the first one would be this get all authors, and let's private. Now the cool thing here is about the return types that we have in the minimal API, because in controllers we are, I would say, very familiar with this iActionResult return type. Now in the minimal API we actually don't have an iActionResult, but what we have is an iResult. So what we return from this method should be an iResult. And then the name, we can give it what we want, get all authors. Now for this one, we don't need actually anything here. So this means that we can simply take what we have here and move it here. Okay, and here the iResult, how was it called in the minimal API? I'm not sure exactly. I guess it's results.okay, yeah. And in the results, we see that we have different type of results that we can use. In this case, we just want to do this okay. But then, yeah, then we need to do this differently. Var authors equals, and we paste everything inside here. Eventually, we can still have everything here in one. Yeah, but in this case, it would be also async task of I result what we return. Okay, so we have this one, and yes, we have the authors, and this is what we return then. Okay. What is right now actually the problem? Okay, because we. So here, let's see what do we have here, or what? Okay. Oh my God, typo, of course. Most common typo ever. So yeah. Now we can simply just call this method inside this function here. So we can then simply just remove a lot of things. You can then await get all authors, and that should do it for now. And now we come to this with name. Now the idea is that since we don't have here controllers, we cannot simply decorate with attributes that Swagger knows about. And when we are working with the minimal API, there are two important things to notice. The first one is where we register the services. And one of the services that is actually at the first place here is this Add Endpoints API Explorer. And this is a service that actually is responsible for reading API metadata. And that API metadata, there are things that are somehow defined by default, but the metadata is actually defined with these extensions that we have here, like for instance with name. Of course, we have at a certain point copy pasted from the weather forecast, so the name here would be then get all authors, and then let's maybe do it like that. We can have different other things to add here, like for Swagger actually to kind of do something. We can have also with display name, which should be a friendly display name. Here gets list authors. Now, the last time that I worked with this 1.5 weeks ago, something or Swagger still doesn't or is not able to 100% read all this data, or was not able to do that at that point. But I assume that when this goes live, everything should work should work properly. Now, what we can also do is we can add tags, and we'll see that tags will be important because it's how we can then maybe try to group the API in Swagger into different portions or parts. And then let's have a tag for this one, like it should be also authors. And then we can even say what this produces. So we say that it produces, and yeah, we say that this one should produce what should produce, I guess. Let me so this send will return I'm not let's see exactly. Get all authors query, and the handler, and it simply returns it returns actually the domain model itself in this case, as I see. Okay, so yeah, in this case I guess we still would need a mapper, private mapper. Of course, you could theoretically also do the mapping directly in the handler, but then we would have to change a lot of things, and I don't want to waste time right now on that. So let's just add the mapper back. Provider get required service. We use the generic method for that, and we need the imapper for that. So instead of returning authors, we want to return mapper.map. We have the author DTO. Actually, we return a list of author DTO, and then we provide the authors. I don't remember exactly if we have created everything that we need for that. Let's just look here in the author profile. We have here a profile from author DTO. Okay, because we have used the author DTO actually for posting the author, not for getting it. So let's look a little bit here. And I guess, Mihai, this also answers the questions you had. So the reason was that we used the author DTO in this case just for the creation of the author, but for retrieving we were just using the actually directly the domain model. So yeah. Or yes, we return directly all the authors here in the get. Okay. Let me see, where do we have the error here? Okay, so what we want to return here is a list of let's make it of authors still, and we won't use the mapper here to map to authors because this DTO is for the post. We'll create maybe a dedicated DTO for the get, and actually this is one thing that is worth to be emphasized. Usually when you work with DTOs, you don't have one DTO that actually fits everything. You usually have DTOs for different scenarios, so it's totally normal, and it happens actually most of the times in real applications that you would have a DTO for posts and puts, and you would have a DTO for gets, because there might be different data sets that you would actually want to display. And when it comes to our author DTO, we see that here we have only the first name, the last name, the bio, and the date of birth. So this is when we post it. So this is what is mapped from the body. But when we get the author, we actually want to get more information about the author. We also want to get the ID. And in this case, I think we want to get the ID, the first name, last name, full name, date of birth, and the bio. That, yeah, we want to get actually all of this information. So back to the author module. So we say that it produces a list of author, and we can also then specify that, for instance, it produces, if there is a server error, we can say that, okay, we produce this server error, for instance. And if we want to get an author by ID, then we would have most probably also a 404 that we return. But basically the idea is that in order to decorate your endpoint with the metadata that Swagger can read and organize the documentation for that, you would have to specify this using these extension methods here. Okay, let's then move to the next one and also move this one to a dedicated method. So we would have here private async, once again, task of iResult. Once again, iResult is specific for the minimal API. It's very similar as a concept to the iAction result that we have on controllers. So it's an iResult create author. The only thing here is that we need an author DTO. Okay. So let's try to move everything from this one in the new one. Okay. Yeah, right now we can't really do this like that. So let's var result equals weight, and then this would be an author. So return results. Here we could also return a created result, but then we can specify the route and things like that. But I don't want to get into this right now. So we'll just return the result here in an OKU. Good. So we can then use this create author. Here's, let's say, author DTO. Okay, so this should work. This means that we can simply, once again, just remove everything from here. And await create author, and then we pass the author DTO to it, and this should be okay. Good. And now let's also decorate this with name. Sorry, this should be a string. Then the display name. Here, let's say create a new author, and then let's say with the tags here, this belongs also to authors. Here, what do we produce? Produces it's just a single author, and produces, it could also produce 500. So that should do it for now. Okay, how's the stream going? Okay, I guess everything should still work. Seems like that. Okay, so let's go back to this. Good. So now that we have done this, let's see how Swagger would actually, if there is any change in Swagger. As said previously, when I worked with this, and I didn't do any update to the packages, so yeah, we have here the author module, so it basically takes the name of the module, which is not what I would have expected, and I don't see also a display name or anything else, but the response types seem to be documented right now. So previously they weren't, but right now seems that we have also documented response types. And yeah, we have the author because this is what we actually return right now. Then we have the author get, we have the author DTO, which we use actually for posts only. And I promise you, I will create a DTO also for the gets. Now, I think there is something else that we can actually configure for Automapper, at least to see things that that are kind of taken from our description of the metadata. Good. So I'm thinking right now, because Swagger can be configured or there are things that we configure in the application, and there are things that we configure in the service itself. But I guess what we configure in the application is usually regarding to the environment and versioning and things like that. So let's actually look here into this method like add swagger gen, because this actually allows us to provide some configuration. And let's see if we can tweak a little bit the configuration so that we can maybe add some additional information to that. So let's see on seed what we have. We have this swagger doc that we can add here and here. I guess we would provide this should be the v1 version, and then we can just provide an anonymous object that has some information. So for the title of this one, we can take this from the builder environment, and we can use the application name. And yeah, I guess then the version we can manually add here the v1. This is a first configuration that we can add. But then I guess we can actually use tags. Let's see what we have here. Document predicate equals nor map type. There are a lot of things that we can use here. But I guess this is what we need. Tag actions by. And if we tag actions by, this can be configured further. And let's say tag action, and I guess we can also have here another. Okay, so here we can return a new list. Here we can define a string list that provides information on how we should tag this. So it would be a TA action descriptor, which describes the action, and then what do we have here? Have ID, endpoint metadata. What we have in this endpoint metadata? Have count, so that's not really something that we could use, I guess. Have a lot of information, but that's it's not something that we could actually use. Let's see what we have here. Route values, action constants, display name we have. Let's see, do we have tags here? Filter description, ID, parameter, properties. Route values, no, I guess display name is the only thing that we can use to tag things. And since this is nullable, I'm not sure what the problem is. I guess we just have to add this exclamation mark at the end. This is because of the nullable reference types that we have here in .NET 6, basically in C# 10. This is more a feature of C# 10. And theoretically, right now, I guess that it should tag the action on the Swagger documentation by this display name. So maybe we can go back here and edit this, because here, if we specify a display name, authors, and the display name is also authors. And right now I would expect that if I run this, the section should be authors and not author module. Yeah, so basically this is a part, and I guess that that worked at least for now. I guess this is a part that still needs to be a little bit investigated, and I would also have to research if there are any updates. So right now we can see that we see authors here, but unfortunately we still don't see any description, and I would expect to have a description here. Um, yeah, so I guess it's not worth right now to invest more time in this, but this is definitely something that needs to be investigated more before, I don't know, maybe deciding to use the minimal API for a real production API. We have to be sure that we can use all the Swagger stuff correctly, because right now it seems that the metadata that we actually use here is not processed correctly by Swagger so far. So yeah, probably that's something that still will be improved until the go live, I guess. Good. So yeah, now we have created this, and just to be able, okay, let's go back to what one of the comments was, that we have the author, and we shouldn't display the author itself because this is from our domain model. We should then display a DTO instead. So let's here in the author folder create a new class, and let's call it author get DTO. And this class here, maybe updating Swagger would work. Yeah, it could be. So author get DTO, this should be a record. Let's see if it works. So author get DTO, what do we have for the author that we want also to display? So we want to display the ID because the clients will need to know the ID of the author, but I'm not sure if we need to display first name and last name. We can just display the full name instead for that author, and then the date of birth and the bio. So I guess we just display the full name. So let's go back to the, where is it, author get DTO, and string name, this would be the first one. Then what else could we have here? String bio, date, time, date of birth. Was there anything else that we said? So date of birth, bio, full name, and the ID. We want the ID also to be available. So where is it here? Int ID. Cool. So we have this record, and now we also have to add a profile for that. So in this case, what is the problem? Yeah, I know. I remember the problems that we had last time because the naming of the folder. So we have to rename this namespace to author feature, and now I guess that it should work. So right now what we have to do here is create a new map. And in this case, we just want to map from the author to the author get DTO. However, here I want to, here we would need a custom mapping. So in this case, we would need this for member. Of course, it's with dot. That's why we have this error. And then source, and this is the destination. So for the destination, and the name is like this: options map from, and source. From the source, we want to map it from the full name. And right now we have a mapping for that, so Automapper should know how to handle this. Now, if we go back to the author module, to the get all, where is it? It is like here. So in this case, we would let's map also directly in the handler, because if we did the mapping for the create author command handler, but actually we didn't do this here, or yeah, we did. But here we did the mapping. Yeah, but then to add was already an author. I guess we will also have to change here, because from here, like, we get the post, but what we return is actually we want to return the author get DTO. So yeah, we'll have also to change here a little bit. But let's do everything here in the query. So pivot read only I mapper. Okay, perfect. Good. So in this case, what we would do here is this would be var authors equals await. Then we would return mapper.map, and we want to map a list of author get DTO from the authors. I guess I still have some typos here. Here should be a parenthesis, and here it should be one, I guess, and then list. Sorry, that's not correct. Okay, because this is the generic type here, so we want a list of author get DTO, but then without this one. Okay. I'm not sure exactly what, probably there's a typo here somewhere, but I can't see it. So it's mapper.map. Okay, I guess we need one more here and one more here. This angle bracket. Because it's list, no, here not, but here at the end. Okay, and now the problem is that we don't return the correct thing. Because we see that this I request handler, it says that it returns a list of author, but let's change that and say it like this. But in that case, we also need to go in the query itself, because this should also return a list of author get DTO. So if you go here in the handler again, I request handler of, what's the problem right now? Because it does not have the matching return type of task of list of I author get DTO. Why async task? We want to map. So this here is a list of author, which is okay. And here we want to map it to a... Okay. Yeah, but here this doesn't help a lot. Okay, so let us go through everything from the beginning. We have the query. So in the query, we say that it is the get all author query, and it is of type I request. It implements I request, and then of type list of author get DTO, which is okay. Then we have the handler for that, and this should be an I request handler of type get request query, which is correct. And then of list of author get DTO. I guess maybe it shouldn't be. No, the author DTO is actually for posting. Here is what we actually get. Public async data type. Oh my god, yes, this one. Correct. Yeah, and now everything should be fine. Thank you very much. I missed it. Yeah, we had to also change the return type of the method, of course. So right now everything is okay here in the handler, but then in the module where we have get all, in this case we already get a list of author get DTO, which is correct. So then we just have to specify here that it is an author get DTO and should be fine. Good. So this is the first one, but then we have also to change this create author command. So right now it implements an I request of author. This is what it returns, but in this case we want once again to have the author get DTO here as a return type. And then we also have to go to the command handler, and here in the command handler we will also have an author get DTO. And now I have learned my lesson. This should be also of type author get DTO. Good. Now the idea here is that here what we do is we map from the author. So we map from the author DTO, which comes from the body, and we actually map this to this to add, which is an author, and this is what we actually right now write in the database. And then we save the changes, and now probably we'll get also the ID here for this author. So we want maybe to change back this. So instead of returning to add, we will return mapper.map, and we want to map in this time to once again to author get DTO, and we want to map this from what we have added to the database. Now by adding this to the database we should also have the ID, and this is why I wanted to do the reverse mapping. And for this one we already have the profile, I guess, because we also put a reverse map here, which is kind of cool. So that should actually work right now. So yeah, let's run the application once again. So we have authors, and right now also in but I'm still not sure why in the schema we still see the author. I guess maybe somewhere it's left or something like that. But here we have the author get DTO. Here when it comes to the return type, it's the author get DTO, which is okay. And here if we go to the schema of the response type, okay, the response here is still not what we would expect. So let's I guess we haven't changed that. It produces an author get DTO, and theoretically now let's run it again. Still on the other screen. So get, for this it produces the author get DTO, which is correct. And yeah, in fact right now we have only the author DTO and the author get DTO, which is needed here. so we can see the schema for that. So let's get the authors right now. And hopefully everything is working. Okay, we got an error here. Collections generic, API features. Auto get DTO, okay. Needs to have a constructor with 0 args or only optional args. So the author get DTO has here a problem, and I guess this is something that I already encountered once, and I guess this problem is related to Automapper. And the problem here is, let's go to the author get DTO. So it seems that Automapper cannot map exactly here from this record to a class. And I would assume maybe because of this date time that we have here. You know what? Let's just to prove it, if this is the problem, let's just create a regular class here. And here I would have public int ID, public string name. What else do we have? We have the public string bio. Then we have the public date, time, date of birth. Okay. So we have actually transitioned from from a record to a class right now, just to prove if that was the problem. Because I assume that the problem was due to Automapper failing to construct something in that specific record. I remember that I had this problem at a certain point, and well, Stack Overflow seemed to actually not have a solution for that. So let's try it out. And in fact, right now it worked correctly. So yeah, the problem was something that somehow our Automapper was not able to map correctly the record if it contained a struct. That's kind of not very nice, because this means that we would have to use classes from now on. But if some of you, or if anybody of you want to investigate this further, then well, just please feel free to do it, and yeah, maybe post an update as a comment to this video. But yeah, the problem is that Automapper cannot map from a record to a class when the record has field / properties of so which are a class or a struct. So this is what the problem seems to be. So yeah, for now we have kind of sorted it out. Good. So let's take a look of what we could do next. Use the long way of creating it. Yeah, but if I use the long way of creating the record, then actually what difference does it make to a regular class? I mean, it's the only difference that I would say it would do is if I would have to compare for equality, because a record by default compares all the properties for equality, while a class usually, when you compare for equality, is just a reference equality. So yeah, that would be possible, but if I use the long way of doing that, let's also at least use init. These are, by the way, init only properties. and it's a feature, I guess, from C# 9 or 8, I guess 9. So you can use this also on classes, for instance. Right now we still have a record, but yeah, we have defined it like a regular class, I guess. But it should also have a default constructor. Yeah, let's try it out. Just replacing what we had in parentheses was not possible because that is not a syntax that is acceptable for a class. That syntax is specific for the record. So if you have a class, you have to write down the properties. It's not done behind the scenes, but it worked. So yeah. So in this case, if we used the long way of creating a record, everything worked fine. But if we used the shortened syntax, I guess it still works without this because it still should have a default constructor. But at least it works with init only properties, so that seems to be fine. Let's run it again. And it works. So we still have a record, but the only thing is that we cannot use the shorthand syntax for that. And if you missed the previous stream, what I mean by shorthand syntax is this one. So you just specify record, and then in parentheses you specify the property names, and that's basically it. But this syntax is not valid for classes. And then in that case, you just need to also, if you use this record, to just do everything like you do in a regular class. Now the downside of it is that you cannot use the shorthand syntax, which is very handy actually. But well, the upside is that if you need to do an equality comparison between different author get DTO instances, then it will always check all the properties when it checks for the equality, which is something that is specific for the record. Good. So yeah, now we have also sorted this out. Now the other thing that that somebody here mentioned was that maybe if we update Swagger. To be honest, I don't think I want to do this right now. Let's see even if we have an updated version, because I'm afraid that other things might break. So we have the Swashbuckle APIs. So we have the version. It's actually the latest version, and it's the pre-release version of it. So we can't actually update it. So that's it. Is it due to date time property? Could you check it by removing date of birth? I'm sure it is because of that. Because I remember when I ran into this issue some other time, you could have so if you have a struct like the date time, but also if you have your own type, your own class as a type property, then it's still to see that there is a 6.2.3 version. Yeah, but I don't see it. Okay, yeah, it is. Let's update it. So the previous version that we have was 6.1.5 if we run into other troubles. So this kind of got a little bit stuck. And now it seems that we have the latest version. Let's see if anything changed for the API. So we still have authors like we did previously, but we still don't have anything new here. We have the success, we have the server error, but no description, no nothing. I guess that's something that I will have to investigate further. And probably I will do some videos then on this channel regarding this when I found out. But I guess right now it's not a good time to really invest in this. So let me think about how we should continue here, because we could actually create here some more endpoints to get by ID, but I guess we already got the idea of how this works, and then I can maybe go over to the other module, which would be a module that will be a little bit more complicated, and there I would like to introduce the idea of an endpoint, so we can group our more complicated and nested endpoints into different groups and not place everything here in a single method. As I said, I will try here for this API to keep everything as smooth as possible and have the files and actually the classes containing it very very small. So maybe by adding summary to your methods, point 4. Do we have a summary here, do you mean? We don't have. When I looked here, there's actually nothing. Produces problem, but this is produces. This is what we do already. I really don't see here anything that we could add. You mean as an attribute at the method? Let's try to do that. I guess you mean this one. Okay, but why don't you see it? I mean as a comment. Yeah. Let's see. I was more accustomed to using attributes to define things for Swagger. Yeah, let's don't leave here space. Let's try it out. Yeah, I got it. Method documentation. By the way, there's a slight delay from when I see what you actually commented and until you get my response. There's an actual delay. So it's not 100% real time. It never is for no streams. But yeah, it seems that it's still nothing here. Yeah, I guess that's it for now. And I can't really do a documentation here because that's a method that actually contains several different endpoints. So that wouldn't actually help very much in this case. But I promise you I will look into, well, how can we really get Swagger up and running and with all the possible features with the .NET 6 minimal API. But you also have to understand right now there's basically no documentation for this .NET 6 minimal API. There will probably be starting November 8th when there is the release, but for right now, it's actually mostly trial and error if you want to do something. Good. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for this module. And I would say let's have a short break and let's go then to the blogs module, where we will have some more complicated stuff. And I want actually to also split the module or the endpoints that we have in this module into different files based on a logical grouping of the type of actions that that those endpoints perform, because if we have a more complex module, this method would get very, very, very long, especially if you have nested resources. So this is what I want to implement for the blogs module. But I would need a short break before that, and I will be back in 10 minutes, and we will then continue with a more complex module, which is the blogs module, and we'll see how we can then subdivide the module to use different type of endpoints. So yeah, stay tuned, and I hope to see you right back in 10 minutes. Okay, I'm back here. So, as said, I want to go over to the blogs module, but as said, as this blog part will be a little bit more complicated, we have or we would need some additional logic of manipulating the state of this blog object. So the first thing that we need to do is we would need to do some updates to our domain model in this case. And what I will do right now is I will set everything up as I actually usually like to do with my domain entities, to encapsulate a state that cannot be mutated unless it is validated by the class itself using maybe validators and things like that. But in this case, I won't create the validators, but I'll just create the setup for that. And what this actually means is, well, there are quite a few things that that this actually means. So first of all, I would make all properties private, because I don't want anybody to be able to mess with the state of a blog object. So if somebody wants to do any changes to the properties, which also means changes to the state of this blog, they need to do this through methods. It will be private once again. Okay. And then here also this should also be a private setter. This should also be a private setter. And of course, the list should also be a private setter. Okay, so what I would like to do here in this case is maybe to also change this to an IEnumerable. Because the problem is, if I make this a private setter, the problem is, as this is an I collection, theoretically consumers could also say contributors add or contributors remove, and I don't want this to be possible. I want to expose this type of behavior through my own methods here that I will create. But I guess we'll look into that. Yes, both add and remove. So this now, how I usually set up my classes for the details for domain entities. So first of all, I use usually static factory method to create the object, because I will also make the constructor private, by the way. Entity framework is able to still work with private constructors. Here, what's the error? More than not exactly sure. Do I call this somewhere? This is for the non-nullable more than one protection modifier. Private and public. Sorry for that. Yeah. Okay. So then I have here a public method that would be return a blog, and it will be called create blog. And actually here is what, when we think about what is the information that we need when we create a blog. We don't need the ID because this is generated by the database. We need a name, we need a description. We don't need a created date because this is something that we will set here in our constructor, so it's something that we want to set. We will need the author ID because we want to assign the blog to a certain author from the start. And that's actually it. That's everything that we would need to create a new instance. For the contributors, we will have then separate methods to add contributors. Contributors are not added when we create the first instance of that. So, in this case, we would need, for all those, we would need some parameters. So let's take them string name, string description. We don't need the date time, but we need an int author ID, and that's actually it. Now here what we could do is simply return new blog, and we can use this here. Of course, here before you return, you would do validations on the parameters and things like that. Right now, to keep it simple, we will just create a new blog, and that's it. So yeah, for the first one, name equals name. That's what we need. Then description equals description. That's also okay. And the author ID is author ID, and that should be it. So once again, each consumer that wants to create a new blog will be actually obliged to use this factory method, but it should also be static, be called directly on the blog instance. So there is no other way. For consumers to actually create an object except for that. And here I have full control about every aspect. There's a question here on YouTube. Isn't it easier to use init in your properties instead of using the factory to creating a blog? Actually, no. You mean for the properties? Yeah, but if I use init for the properties, they would actually be it will be possible only to set them when you initialize the object. But then we will still need to do changes on that object. So this is why we need a private setter. Because the init, it would actually restrict that you can set those properties only when you initialize the object, not afterwards. But we will need to perform updates after we initialize the object. And what updates? Well, actually what we'll do now, First, we can expose here a method for updating the basic blog info, which is exactly the same things that we get here, except for the author ID. This is not something that you can update as a basic blog update. You just can edit the name and the description for that right now. So you can change a record by creating a new one. Yeah, but this is not a record. This is a class. As I want to have behavior, I said this is a domain class, which is also in domain-driven design called an entity, which is actually identified by a thread of continuity on this ID. And I don't want this to be a record. Even if I check for equality, I don't want my domain entity to be a record. Yes, I know using the with keyword, it's for a record, but once again, I don't want to use records for my domain entities. And I explained why. Well, because records usually are doing equality comparison based on properties, and I don't want to do that. I want to have here a full entity, which is actually defined by this thread of continuity on this ID property. And that's basically the reason why I don't want to use a record here in my domain model. And I use records in the DTOs because there I'm not really interested in this type of continuity on how states change. So yeah, I really don't want to use a record here in the domain model, and I strongly advise you against to do that. Now, as I mentioned, I guess sometime maybe in a comment on a video on this channel, you could use records in your domain modeling when you try to model the concept of value objects in domain-driven design. But here, this blog is certainly an entity, it's not a value object. You might want to model as value objects things like currencies, height, width, and things that actually are defined only by their value. But here the entity is defined by the identity, the ID, and the behavior and the state actually that it has. And the difference is that between an entity and a value object, in an entity, the state is mutable. So you can mutate the state of an entity. That's the whole concept of having or of working with entities. But you cannot mutate the state of a value object, or if we talk in C# terms, you cannot mutate the state of a record. It will only create. It will always create a new one. It's the same actually what happens with strings, for instance, if you do string concatenation. So yeah, I totally would advise against using records in your domain modeling, except when you want to model the concept of value objects from domain-driven design. Good. So let's go further. So what we also need, we would need, this is not static, but it would be void update blog info. So here we would need string name and string description. And here consumers could provide a new name or a new description. It actually doesn't matter. What we will do is we will have this one, and description would be equal to description. Once again, here you would have to do validations and similar stuff, but we don't want to do that right now to keep this simple and go back to our API itself. And then what we can do here is, for now, let's give the option to consumers to add a contributor, public void add contributor. And here to add a contributor, I would like to pass me in an author. And I would just add this contributors add. And here I would place contributors dot add the author. And then I would also like to give the option to remove contributor, public also void and since we are here in our domain model, we don't work with DTOs, we work only with our domain entities. Okay, and then here contributors dot remove. Okay, so that's kind of like a very basic setup, similar to the principles of domain-driven design when my domain entity fully encapsulated its own state and is not exposed, or state is not exposed to be changed only through the methods that we expose here. And that's actually the place where you can do a lot of logic. And as I said when I started this series, when you are using this type of setup with CQRS, so with comments, queries, and handlers, the idea is that what you usually have in repositories and in the service layer, you can just move in the handler and in your domain model. And having a rich domain model is actually something that would be very important. So in this case, or in most of the cases when we would have a service layer, all this type of stuff would be in the service layer. But right now it is in the domain model itself, which is actually a good thing. Now, I guess we are now ready to go on, or to go back actually, to our API and start working on this blogs module. So let's actually do that. I hope you can still see me and hear me. Yeah, should be okay. I see right now that you have posted a comment with enable annotations in Swagger. Okay, I will look at that later. But that comment was actually hidden and I had to approve it, so I simply didn't see that until now. So yeah, sorry for that. Good. So let's go here. In the features, we have the author feature, but we want to add a new one. And here it would be, and let's call it maybe blogs, to not have conflicting types with namespaces, like we had in authors. And what I would like to do here is, as I know that I will have here plenty of stuff, I will have here different subfolders for different concerns that belong to that feature. So I would have here Automapper profiles. What I would also have here is a different folder for my commands. I would also like to have a different folder for my queries. I would like to have a different folder for my handlers. I guess I'll just add a handlers folder where I put everything. And then I will also have the concept of endpoints that I talked about. So let's also add something from endpoints. Okay, good. Now, in order to be able to define an endpoint, we would need to create a new interface for that. In order to, well, know exactly what an endpoint is and what an endpoint should do, because we should be able to adhere to the construct and do the registrations that we actually need. So let's go here in the abstractions folder and add a new class, which will actually be an interface, and let's call it endpoint. Okay, and in this interface we'll have only one method. What we want to do is actually to defer the registration here of map endpoints to the endpoint itself. So I would have to return here an endpoint route builder, and let's also call this register routes. and we'll get here the I endpoint route builder, and yeah, let's call it app, and we'll call it app. I did think a little bit about this because as we usually do here, for instance, in this module, we have, but here we called it endpoints. But usually, well, when we start off the project, it's you call these methods directly on the app. Yeah, but now here it's called endpoints. Let's be consistent, and let's call it endpoints here. Good, and let's for now create the following thing. So here in our blogs in endpoints, let's create a new class, and I'll call this class blog common endpoint. Okay, so it will be a public class, and it would inherit I endpoint. And of course, it would need to implement the interface. Right now, we first will just return endpoints. Okay, good. And let's create a new one, which would be the endpoint responsible for all the actions on the contributors. So let's create a new class here. Blog contributors endpoint. Maybe the naming is not the best, but it's the best that I could come up with. I endpoint, and also let's implement the interface. For now, not to throw errors, return endpoints. Good. And also let's add a blogs module similar to what we had in our authors, and this one will add directly in the parent folder of this feature. Let's call it blogs module, and this should inherit I module. Okay. Good. So we have these two things here. What we will need here, of course, is probably I'm not sure about the mapper if we'll use it, but I guess most probably. But yeah, we'll see. Let's for now have this here private I mediator. We will surely need the mediator. Private I mapper. And we'll see if we need a mapper. I guess we won't, because I guess we'll do all the mappings in the handlers for now. Good. Now, in the register module, what we also did previously is then simply just require the services that we need. In this case, the iMediator and the iMapper. So it would be var provider equals builder.services build service provider. Okay, and here we have mediator equals provider dot get required service, and we'll need here the I mediator, and then mapper equals provider get required service, and here that would be the mapper, so I mapper, which is okay. And then we return the builder. Now, I guess till here it's actually very common what we have done. So it's exactly what we have created also for for the authors module. But the new thing that we will do here is what we actually do here in this map endpoints method. Because as said here in the map endpoints method, in the authors module, we already added the endpoints that we need. But for the blogs feature, there would be plenty of such endpoints. And then the method would get very, very long. And I don't like this. So the idea is that we want to split that in our different endpoints classes that we have created. So in this case, let's go here in the blog common endpoint. And let's create a constructor here. Now this one, here I would surely need, for instance, the private, here I can make it read only because I will assign it in the constructor. Mediator equals mediator. No, sorry. You just need to give the name. And then a private, not the iLogger. Yeah, logging. Okay, that's something that I guess we'll add in the next stream. That's a very, very nice part of it. So what it's called, Automapper. But also I like to name the fields with underscore, a personal preference. Then here I would need in the constructor an iMediator. And I will also need an iMapper. Then assign those. That would be it. Good. And now here actually comes the part where we can actually do the registrations. Where do I guess here I'm missing a semicolon at the end. So the idea is here that in this register route, this is where we will move what we or the actions that we want to register. And let's actually start here to register a brand new route here. Let's just return that. So it would be a endpoints dot map get, and here the get would be on API/blogs. This is where we would get the list with all the blogs, and here we could just we can just provide here. Let's do it first of all, just to set things up. Sorry, it's async like that. Okay. And for now, let's just inject the DB context here. Thoughtful DB context. First, I just want to set things up. Just to be able to have a common concept about what should happen here, or how these endpoints actually work. So in this case, we just return wait context dot blogs dot to list async, but it's without underscore. And we'll then just move over to use a mediator just in 1 second. So the main idea is here now that we have the module and we have separate endpoints that actually group different type of actions based, let's say, on a logical concern. So we have this blog common where we will expose actions that are common for the blog, like get all blogs, get blog by ID, create blog, update blog. And then we would have those actions that are specific for contributors. And then we might have, for instance, add contributor and remove contributor, and we will have that in a totally separate endpoint. Now, the module itself will need to be able to register all these endpoints. And in this case, if we just go here back to the blogs module for one moment, what we can actually do here is in this one, So just return the endpoint. So what we could do here is we could simply say here, for instance, okay, new blog common. How did we call that? Blog common endpoint. Should be able to add a using here, and of course, and here we said that in the constructor we want to provide the mediator to be used and the mapper to be used if necessary. So we have this one, and we can just then call here register route. So this means that when this module sorry, we have to pass the endpoints. So when this module will come the time for it to automatically register, what it will happen is that it actually will defer the registration of the actions themselves to the corresponding endpoint. And we can set up our blog's contributor class exactly the same way. So for now we don't have any endpoints on it, but we can still create a constructor for that. We can still say here that we need a private read the private read only I mediator, and we need a private read only I mapper. It's okay. So let's I mediator and I mapper. So that should be fine. And here mediator equals and mapper equals mapper. So that would be it. So this means that in the blogs module we can just go here once again and say new blog, how this was contributors endpoint, and we just provide here the mediator and the mapper. And yeah, that's actually the basic setup. I see here a question basically around each domain model you are creating a feature. Yes, but here actually in this case, yes, but here, well, there is no exact rule on how exactly those features should be grouped. If they tend to become very, very big, you can group them by even smaller units. So it's not necessary that you do it like that for each domain model you have a feature. So this is based on the requirements that you actually have from your API, how you actually design your features. But right now, for this context, I see this as the most appropriate thing to do. For APIs, this might be straightforward, but if you go for the same model in a regular MVC application, then probably your features would be more granular than that, I would say. So yeah, here is a place where you can be creative. It's actually just upon your judgment to really understand the requirements that are asked from you, and then design how you want to group them in features so that you can keep everything as clean as possible, as maintainable as possible. And from my point of view, what this means, we should have in all the classes that we have in a certain feature, we should have the least amount possible of code that we write. Yeah, but in this case, it seems that it's really grouped around the domain model in my case here. Good. Let's so right now we have these endpoints, and if we look just a little bit here, if let's move back to the blog's common endpoint, where we also have implemented this with map get, and what did we have here with yes, display name is what we use to group things, and this would be blogs with name, and this would be, I don't know, also blogs, whatever. These are things that we can add even at a later point, so it's not really important. What I would like to make sure is that this is right now basically working. So let's run the application. And of course, I don't have any blogs right now in the database because we haven't created any. But my expectation would be that I get an empty array without an error message. So that would be, and you see that, yeah, the grouping by display name works in this case. So we have these blogs. So we have this get API blogs, try it out, execute, and let's see. Hopefully I get an empty array. Yes, I get an empty array, which is actually very, very good. And here we see that the schema is the one that is actually from the domain model. Of course, here we would have to model different things once again, because the owner we want to display here, I don't know, maybe just full name or maybe just the full name, because other than this, I guess, might not be important for the owner in this exact circumstances, because if you want to find a certain owner, you will find it by ID, or maybe also the ID. Because if the client sees here the ID of the owner and wants to get more information about the user, it should have the ID at its disposal. And then for contributors, maybe also we would have just the ID and the full name, probably. I wonder how authentication authorization is being handled on endpoint now. It's authentication and authorization is actually working exactly the same way as it works for controllers. I haven't tested this personally, but I have read about this in several places. Also, Steve Gordon, for instance, but even David Fowler has a gist on GitHub where it explains the different features. Damien Edwards has something like a .NET 6 minimal API playground. The idea of authorization is that you can define authorization policies just like you do normally in configure services. And then what you can do here is, for instance, if we go here to the author, because here we already have implemented some methods. So if you go to the author module, and the idea is that you can actually decorate these methods with the authorize attribute. And of course, here you can well, specify the policy that you want to use and so on. So it should be exactly the same like it was previously. So yeah, authorization should work like this. Or there shouldn't be any problem. Or you could even actually decorate with the attribute of authorize actually here before you call the method. And this would also work. Why doesn't it work? Okay, theoretically it should work, but well, it seems it doesn't. But yeah, when you decorate this with authorize, it should work exactly like it was previously. However, I'm not sure exactly how this happens under the hood, because regularly in controllers you have this happening via filters. But there is one thing here, for the minimal API, there is no support for filters. So there is no concept of filters in the minimal API, of .NET 6. And in fact, there was a discussion, and myself asked this type of question on David Fowler's gist, and he actually also responded. And they said that yeah, filters are 100% not supported right now in the minimal API due to different problems that might arise. But his advice was that we should use middleware. Then my reply was, in that case, okay, that sounds like an option, but still, as developers, I see a very great value, and I really used filters a lot, because it allows you to execute some code right before the execution of the action and right after it, or right after it. And this type of things would also certainly be very, very useful in the minimal API, because if you use a middleware, actually from when your middleware gets executed until your method or your action gets invoked, there are quite a few things that still happen. So I think it would be very, very good to have this type of feature where we could execute some code right before the action gets executed or right after it. And the reply was that in .NET 7 there will be a feature that will be called something like dynamic middleware, where you can actually create a middleware that gets invoked only for specific actions that you might have. So yeah, for filters, there is actually no support for now, but the authorization process should work like it worked also before on controllers, just by decorating with the authorize attribute. Well, filters are something very cool in ASP.NET Core, I would say. It actually allows you to hook actually your code to the execution pipeline of a certain controller action, and you can then maybe execute some code right before that controller action is executed or right after it, and that could be quite useful for a lot of cross-cutting concerns like logging, for instance, or maybe if you do benchmarking, or well, there are really quite a lot of scenarios where you could use filters to move out cross-cutting concerns from your controller, like logging, for instance. So yeah, filters are very, very, very nice. So you should definitely look into what filters are and how they are used, because they are really, really useful to keep your code clean. Okay, so yeah, that was regarding the authorization part. Okay, so where did we actually... I see that's already fairly late. So the idea is that the next steps that I would like to do is, well, I would simply just like to add here, here the full functionality with comments, with queries and handlers and everything. But I guess that would take some time, and to be honest, I'm a little bit tired right now. So I guess we will call it a day for today. But we will surely resume with the next part as soon as possible. Not sure if tomorrow, but then probably on Tuesday. So if you stay in touch on the channel, then you'll get noticed, because I publish when I plan to do the next live coding session, well, with a lot of hours in advance. So yeah, just keep in touch. So is .NET 5 better than Java Spring? Oh my god. I never like to compare this type of products because, of course, first of all, I am biased, and every time that you hear somebody say that hey, .NET Core or .NET 6 is better than Java Spring Boot, or that Node Express is better than the other, that opinion is usually also biased. So the problem is that it depends a lot on the things that you are accustomed to work with. Now, Java Spring Boot has, of course, a lot of very, very good things. Like right now, it also supports dependency injection. However, it's tough it's tougher to define there, for instance, the lifetime of the services. And in Java, they are by default singletons, and here in .NET 6, you have full control of the lifetime of the services that you need. But from a lot of perspectives, they are quite very, very, very similar. From performance perspective, it seems, according to benchmarking done by different type of third-party organizations, that .NET 6 is way better than almost anything else. I guess only Express is maybe faster. But once again, this type of how fast it is actually, or it's mostly never quite a decision point, or because it's when you choose to create a new product in a company, there are usually a lot of different aspects in the mix. So it's actually not that easy, and there is never 100% clear answer on questions like, is .NET 5 or .NET 6 better than Java Spring Boot? Is C# better than Java? Is C# better than JavaScript? Which programming language is the best? These are type of questions, and whenever you hear people that are very strongly opinionated that this one is really the best of the best, then you should be very cautious, because this is the type of questions that you never can have 100% clear answer. It always depends on a lot of different circumstances. So yeah, I know that this answer maybe was not what you expected, but that's my opinion, that it's very hard to tell. It depends on a lot of different things, on how you actually want to evaluate if something is better or not. And then the criteria of the evaluation is for every person and for every company actually different. That's why different companies choose different frameworks or different platforms. Yeah, that's mostly it. Yes, I will push the changes to GitHub right when we will finish this stream, so just in a few minutes. And yeah, this being said, thank you once again very much for watching, and I hope to see you then the next time, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So have a great day. Bye.